learned the right wing of his own party planned to challenge him in the primaries. Conservative columnist Pat Buchanan all but said he'll run against the president in New Hampshire.
We're getting an awful lot of support, and if the decision were held today, it would probably be a go decision.
I know he has no idea whatsoever of getting elected in 1992, but it's a free country, and he can do what he wants.
That was in line with Republican reaction that ranged from derision to disdain, but some other Republicans took the challenge seriously.
I think Pat could do some damage in this sense. I think he could run a good race in New Hampshire. I think he'd get a fair amount of support. What happens then is the debate that's opened up.
The president himself ignored the conservative uproar. His enemy of choice remained the Congress.
And the agenda of that liberal leadership is simply this: take whatever legislation the president sends up to the Hill and knock it down.
With all the other turmoil, there was this.
David Duke is the son of George Bush.
And even though he lost yesterday in Louisiana, self-proclaimed Republican David Duke is now widely expected to challenge the president. How serious is discontent on the right? And what about the economy? We'll ask a panel of influential conservatives: former Education Secretary William Bennett, Senator Phil Gramm of Texas, Representative Vin Weber of Minnesota, and David Keene of the American Conservative Union. The rumble on the right, an issue facing the nation.
From CBS News, Washington, Face the Nation, with CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Scheiffer. This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world.
Hi, are you ready to order?
Yes. I'll have the grilled chicken.
All right. The filet, medium, please.
Sounds good. I'll have the same, medium rare.
Just salad, please.
Oh, vegetarian?
Yes.
Me too. You know, we've got something you really ought to try.
Now it's possible for restaurants to offer an array of new and appealing entrees to their vegetarian customers, thanks to an innovative new food made from vegetable-derived protein and natural ingredients. It's low in fat, cholesterol-free, and even contains dietary fiber. And it's so versatile, it's at home in many recipes.
Thank you.
And the vegetarian patty.
Thank you.
Sure.
New vegetable protein foods from the Archer Daniels Midland Company.
So, do you like it?
Trust me, that's a yes.
ADM, supermarket to the world.
Dean Witter believed in priorities.
Know why your clients are saving. Know why they're investing.
Okay, come on, folks.
At some point, it's college. Later on, retirement. But Dean Witter knows that often the highest priorities are all the things that happen in between.
Is there anything else you want?
Just the first dance.
There are many ways to measure success.
We measure success one investor at a time.
And here today for our discussion are former Education Secretary and former drug czar William Bennett, Senator Phil Gramm of Texas, the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, Representative Vin Weber of Minnesota, who is the secretary of the Republican Conference, and David Keene, who is chairman of the American Conservative Union. Gentlemen, we have not only a full house, but a full plate this morning. David Duke, Pat Buchanan, and the economy. Somehow I have a feeling that the first two are in some way connected to the last. So let's start with that. Senator Gramm, the president said Friday that when it comes to the economy, his view is something like the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And that seems in line with kind of the low-key approach that the White House is taking on the economy. Should the White House be doing more?
I think you're going to see the president come out with a comprehensive program in the State of the Union. I think it's important that it be a daring program. I think we need to jumpstart the economy. I think we need to lock in a formula that will assure that as the defense build-down occurs, if we make progress in dealing with the Soviet Union, that that money will not be spent by Congress, that that money will go back to working families so that they can invest in their future and in the process make sound investments in America.
So you're talking in, there's great similarity in some ways in what you say and what Senator Benson says, and that is, let's get some of what we're supposedly going to save in the defense budget to middle-income people in some sort of a tax cut.
I think that's very important because Congress says we need to spend more on housing, nutrition, education. I agree. The question is who should spend the money?
Why?
Congress or families? I say families.
Why wait until next year? Why wait to the State of the Union?
Well, I think the president had to make a decision. My own view in September and October, and I said it over and over again, that we should act. The president has decided not to act at this point. I think waiting to the State of the Union will give him the ability to get a comprehensive program together to build a base for it. We're only going to get to do this thing once. It's important that we do it right.
Representative Weber, there are rumors up on the Hill that you may try to introduce something sooner, that you don't think you ought to wait till next year. What are you talking about? In fact, is that true?
We shouldn't wait a month. We shouldn't wait a week. We shouldn't wait a day. The economy's in bad shape now. People are seeing the value of their houses fall for most Americans. That's the primary asset that they're going to build up in their whole life, and people are angry about it. Furthermore, I just strategically disagree with the president's decision that he's going to be in a better position to do this in the State of the Union message next January, when committees are going to begin hearings on all sorts of issues and the budget comes down the pike. I think the president ought to act dramatically. He ought to tell the Congress, this recession is your fault. I want you to come back after Thanksgiving and deal with that one single issue of the American economy and deal with it responsibly. I think he'd win. I think he'd get 90% of what he needs. What we're talking about doing in the next week or two, though, is looking at the refinancing of the RTC, commonly known as the S&L bailout among the general public, and saying not one more nickel should go into bailing out the S&Ls, if you want to call it that, until we have taken steps necessary to shore up the real estate market in this country. That'll not only help everybody who owns real estate, but it'll also reduce the cost of the S&L bailout because it'll improve the value of the properties the federal government is holding and liquidating.
So you're talking about something immediate, even after Thanksgiving. All indications are is the Congress is going to let out at Thanksgiving.
Every indication is that, but I'm just telling you what I think we ought to do. I think the president could dramatically grab control of the situation right now and get what he wants out of this Democrat Congress.
That's what he has to do. The problem the president faces on the economy, and maybe part of the problem the economy faces, is that there's a perception, one, that he's been uninvolved and uninterested in domestic matters, and secondly, and maybe this does require him to wait until January, when he comes out, it has to be with something a little broader and a little more sensical than blaming the recession on MasterCard. He's got to come out and take the leadership. When a country's in troubled economic times, what it wants is a president who will exercise leadership and give people the sense that he knows where he's going. And the problem right now is that there's no sense out there that the administration knows where it's going or where it wants to go.
Now, Bill Bennett, you've been in government, now you're out of government. Evaluate what Mr. Keene has said in comparison to what Ben Weber said and what Senator Gramm said.
I agree with David, and I agree with the others, too. I think I'd tend toward Vin in terms of acting, Vin Weber in terms of acting now. He's got to act on this, he's got to act on other things. Look, there's no timeout in this town. You're on offense or you're on defense. And frankly, right now, the president's on defense. Democrats are hitting him. There's not much of a response out of the White House, and I think you got to bring the boys in, the boys and the girls, the senior management team, and say, I want something better than this puny stuff I'm getting on interest on credit cards, imaginary schools of the 20th century, and a muddled message on civil rights. He's got to act and act decisively, and if he doesn't get these kind of proposals, shake it up, change some of the senior management.
Let's talk about this credit card business here just a minute, because one of the criticisms that's being made of the White House is that there's kind of a muddled message that's coming out. Now, last week, the president said we ought to do something about bringing down interest rates on credit cards. Later in the week, the Senate passed such a bill. Yesterday, Housing Secretary Kemp said if they do pass such a bill that the president would veto it. Secretary Brady said today that, well, maybe veto is too strong a word, but that's a bad idea to pass that legislation. I mean,
if they pass it, you only have to.
Let's see what Senator Gramm
First of all, I think the vote in the Senate was totally irresponsible. I don't think that there are many members of the Senate who think we ought to go back to usury limits where government setting interest rates. The Soviet Union's rejected that. Eastern Europe's rejected it. Even China's rejected it. The word hadn't gotten to Washington. The president's statements in terms of jawboning, getting banks to look at it, I think that's probably in bounds. But trying to pass a law to fix interest rates, clearly that's destructive. And I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that the bump down in equity values on the stock market was to some extent affected by that and by the collapse of the banking bill. a bill the president introduced, a bill that was needed, a bill that the Democratic leadership in Congress killed.
This is the kind of thing that you get into when you don't have an overall policy and an overall direction. You start dilettantishly saying, let's do this and let's do that. And in this town, the Congress will take you up on it, and they'll pass something that'll accomplish exactly the opposite of what you plan to accomplish. If they actually capped credit card rates, they'd not only eliminate credit for a lot of people, they'd kill whatever recovery might be taking place in the whole retail segment of the economy and everything else. But you're going to get this kind of thing if you just sort of pop off. And in that speech,
so you're saying
he had about 40 different suggestions of things that you could do, and that's not the way you go about it.
He didn't just pop off, but somebody wrote a little card and stuck it in a speech, a little insert. But this is not coming from a point of view. You know, a view of the world, a view of your plan, a view of what it is you're trying to accomplish on this and other issues.
The worst problem.
And here's where he's not being served with.
Exactly right. The problem is it diverts us from the real problem. The problem with this economy is not that consumers haven't run enough debt up on their credit cards. I mean, and this administration has said that. Secretary Brady talks about the problem of too much consumer debt. Our problem is lack of capital investment, a sagging real estate market, flat incomes for middle-income Americans, none of which is going to be remedied by getting people to run up their credit card debt more. You got to cut the capital gains tax and restore some incentives for investment in the real estate market and do something for American families that are hard hit right now.
All right, the rumble on the right. Is it really a rupture on the right? We'll be back and talk about David Duke and Pat Buchanan in just a minute.
Alice, found your resume on the copier. Let's go and meet the new boss.
I've got work to do.
A lot of people betting this place won't make it. They say you've forgotten how to work together. I don't have any easy answers, but I do know this. Together, we have a story to tell, and we're going to start right here. It's good.
Thanks.
How does it fit in with the finished document?
I saw it as a standalone.
Just see if Rogers can help.
Rogers? It's just an assistant.
Every company has a story to tell, every person a contribution to make. It's the document that helps put it all together.
You all feel good about this?
Yes.
So do I.
Faxing, copying, printing. Xerox, the document company.
Dean Witter believed one thing that should distinguish his brokers is their ability to listen.
Listen not only to what our clients say, but what they mean.
I have a vision about retirement. I know.
Each client has a level of comfort.
You know me. I'm a planner.
There is no greater dividend a firm can earn than the confidence of its clients.
You've helped me make some good decisions.
There are many ways to measure success.
We measure success one investor at a time.
The people of CBS News. Dan Rather.
Connie Chung.
Mike Wallace.
Paula Zahn.
Ed Bradley.
Leslie Stahl.
Harry Smith.
Morley Safer.
Bob Scheiffer.
And Charles Kuralt. Experience.
CBS News.
So you thought you'd retire early. Got enough money to last maybe 30 years? Planning for early retirement. Tomorrow's Money Crunch Report on the CBS Evening News.
And we're back with four leading conservatives to talk about yesterday's governor's race in Louisiana, the possibility that the president may be challenged in the primaries by Pat Buchanan, and the economy. Let's go first to David Duke. I would take it that Republicans breathed a great sigh of relief this morning when they learned that David Duke is not going to be the governor of Louisiana. David, is there anything to learn from this, and what was the effect of David Duke on Republicans?
Well, I think there was a bit of relief at his defeat, but there are some messages there that ought to be taken into consideration. First of all, the early success of David Duke has been his ability to expropriate issues that the mainstream of both parties has been ignoring. When you ignore legitimate felt concerns of a lot of people, you're going to have nuts come along and exploit those concerns and grab those issues and steal them. This guy got 40% of the vote in a major state in spite of the attacks of everyone. The messenger was no good, and fortunately the messenger was defeated. But if major politicians ignore legitimate concerns on the part of the people, people like David Duke are going to eventually succeed, and that can't be allowed.
What do you think, Senator Gramm?
Well, I think clearly not only Republicans, but I think the vast majority of Americans did have a sigh of relief. I think David Duke was a bad person, shouldn't be in public office. But I agree with David. Clearly, there are issues the public believes are not being addressed, and when the two major parties fail to address issues that the public is concerned about, historically they've turned either to kooks or to third-party movements. And I think there is a message in that.
You know, go ahead.
Well, this is good news, though. Look, David Duke, in my view, is finished. And now we can talk about these issues without the distraction of Duke. This is the deepest part of the Deep South. You had a lousy alternative, frankly, in Edward Edwards. You had a lot of legitimate issues raised, and the guy got clobbered. I mean, there was the hidden Duke vote. It was so well hidden, nobody could find it. He's finished. I mean, he may make some sort of phony run because this is the only thing he does for a living in '92, but he's not getting anywhere.
Well,
He's
is he really finished? Because let me tell you what the exit polling shows. It shows that 50% of the people who identified themselves as Republicans in Louisiana said they voted for David Duke. 45% of those people said they would consider voting for him for president. So is he finished? What I'm hearing from a lot of Republican consultants is he's going to run the New Hampshire primary.
Oh, he's not. I agree with Bill. I think he's finished. I think it's important to understand, apropos of this whole program, this is not just, quote, rumble on the right. You know who the Duke supporters in Pennsylvania voted for? Harris Wofford, a liberal Democrat. People are angry at the establishment. They're angry at Congress. Right. And unfortunately, they're becoming angry at the president, too. Our point is the president has the opportunity to take the lead and say, I'm angry at the Congress, too. I demand that the Democratic-controlled Congress change its ways, and we can be the agents of change as we go into this next election, rather than the recipients of a kick in the behind from the voters.
All right, that brings us then to Pat Buchanan. Candidly, is Pat Buchanan to be taken seriously?
In what sense?
What do you think, Senator?
Well, I think that Pat is doing a good job where he is in the media. I wish he would stay there. I don't see any possibility that he's going to derail George Bush's nomination.
But he is going to be kind of an embarrassment, isn't he,
well,
for the president?
I think clearly that that I would prefer that he not run. Is it ultimately going to make any difference? I don't think so.
Well, it may turn out all right. I mean, it may get the argument going. But Pat is an odd sort of conservative, you know. First of all, he doesn't like lots of other conservatives. Unless you got the pure position of Pat, he's not happy with you. Second, you know, up in New Hampshire, if he starts talking about foreign policy, he's not going to sound like Ronald Reagan. He's going to sound like Governor Wilder or Tom Harkin. I mean, he does not represent the Ronald Reagan wing of the party.
What Pat is trying to do, or what Pat evidently is trying to do, if in fact he decides to run, is to ride that same wave that Ben was talking about, the same wave minus the racism that David Duke was trying to raise, that upset at the establishment. And it's understandable why he thinks there's something out there, because there is something out there. And there are a lot of conservatives that are distressed with the president. There are a lot of conservatives that are distressed with the way things are going. The real problem from the conservative standpoint is what Bill mentioned and what Phil touched on, and that is that the politics of Pat Buchanan are not really the politics of American conservatism. He's a protectionist. Can you support him on that?
Never.
He's anti-Israel.
He's anti-Israel. Most conservatives are pro-Israel. He's an isolationist. His positions are almost 180 degrees on many points to the broad mainstream of the conservative movement in this country. And in that sense, and this may be also part of what he's trying to do, I think he wants to try and reshape that philosophy, the conservative philosophy, and what it stands for. And I think on that standpoint, his candidacy or potential candidacy is troubling to a lot of people within the movement.
Still, George Bush is always, in my view, always at his best when he's challenged, you know, and he's got challenges now. If he gets in an argument with Buchanan, I think he'll make George Bush better. But what I'm upset, I think what we're all upset about, is here is this man for whom we have great affection and respect, you know, the liberator of Panama and the Persian Gulf, who I think is getting a lot of lousy advice about domestic policy. And I think he needs to shake it up. He needs to let people know that, you know, that they better start giving him something substantial.
Well, let's go back to control of it himself.
Let me just.
I think he is getting bad advice, but it goes to the president. He's got to take control of it. He's got to decide what he wants to do, and he's got to get his message out, and that's what he's not doing.
Well, let me just go back to what you said, because you made reference to it before we went to the break, where you said there needs to be a shakeup around the president. If I heard Governor Sununu correctly this week when he was on an interview program, I believe he said that he would be running the campaign from the White House. Do you think Governor Sununu is one of those that ought to be part of a shake-up?
Well, I don't want to get into individual names or people, but look, there's a notion of this above the
fray.
Let
me just say Governor X.
The Oval Office above the fray and be presidential and all that stuff. And I mean, you know, it's like the ship of state is moving down this placid river. Hell, I mean, it's not placid. They're shooting from all directions. You know, start shooting back. And, you know, I don't know all the inner dynamics of the White House, but I know what this man deserves, and he's not getting what he deserves from his advisors. David's right, you know, the buck stops in the Oval Office. But let the president bring his guys into the Oval Office and tell him he wants something more than the kind of puny proposals he's been getting.
Congressman Weber?
There are a lot of good people around the president politically.
I agree.
The campaign that you want to agree, don't you? After what you've been saying this morning, you better.
Sure. I want to be invited back someday.
I think that John Sununu is a good chief of staff. I think that he should focus on the government, though, not the campaign. And that's what I would say, is we need a Charlie Black or somebody like that who is really a political pro and has been through a presidential campaign before, calling some of the political shots. And I think this president will do just fine. The Bush campaign was a juggernaut in 1988 that ran over a lot of us that were supporting other candidates. Now, that makes me feel real good about 1992, but they got to get that machine rolling.
Go ahead, Senator.
I think basically you got to realize that the president does have the difficult task in domestic policy, and that is whatever he does has got to be filtered through the Congress. But I think the key to the 1992 election is good policy. Good policy is good politics. And I think what has happened here is we hadn't been in a recession for 9 years, and this is something that many people have not had any recent experience with. I think the president has not come to clear focus here. I think he's looked at what can happen bad in the Congress. This could turn into a ruse to raise taxes, cripple the economy, make things worse. We saw that with the interest ceiling on credit cards. But I think clearly the time has come. The president's got to come forward with a dramatic proposal. And I'd like to see him do in domestic policy what he did with the arms control measures with the Soviet Union. Leap over the current debate, break new ground, come out with a dramatic program. When he does that, he'll be focused, the country will be focused, and not only will the 92 election be over, but more importantly, the people will be confident in what their government is doing, and the recession will be behind us.
Well, what is a dramatic program?
I think a dramatic program has got to be a program that comes out with direct stimulus. Capital gains is an old chestnut, but the advantage of it is never in this century have we cut capital gains that the economy did not get a leap forward.
Absolutely.
Never in the post-war period have we cut it that we didn't actually collect more money. I think we've got to refocus the economy toward investment, toward saving. I think we have got to begin to build a permanent process to move defense dollars as our negotiations with the Soviet Union move forward into the hands of families to make investments. If we don't do that, Congress is going to spend every penny of that money, and we're going to be the only country in the world that has used the peace dividend to invest in government rather than the people.
Let's go a step further. There's 3 additional areas where this president has an agenda, and it's exactly what the country wants, and the Democrat Congress is preventing it from happening. I agree with everything Phil said, by the way. But I also think the president should push harder for reform of public housing, do what Jack Kemp wants in terms of tenant ownership and management. The country supports that. He should push harder on what Bill Bennett has led him to do on education, choice in education, real reform of education. Democrat Congress doesn't want anything to do with that. And the country wants us to also enact welfare reform, reward work, keep families intact instead of breaking them up as the current welfare dependency programs do. This president supports all those reforms, and the Democratic Congress is preventing us from acting on them.
And add to that crime, grabbing criminals by the throat. Congress is killing the crime bill today.
I want to get just one assessment from you, and we don't have very much time left, about how much trouble the president is in right now. Ed Rollins here last Sunday said unless something's done about the economy, he honestly thinks the president can be defeated in the November election. What do you think? Just a short answer.
I think it's possible that he could be defeated, but I wouldn't want to put any money on his opposition.
The president's going to be reelected. He's got a deep reservoir of support, and one thing we know about George Bush, whether it's an aviator staying on the bombing run at Chichijima or running in 1988, when the president has to do it, when he gets focused, he can get the job.
10 seconds.
The Democrats have to put up somebody, and when you put up somebody with a name against George Bush is going to look awful tall.
The economy makes it tough, but Bill's right. We have a secret weapon. It's called the Democratic Party.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much. We'll be back with a final word. Just a minute.
If you took out everything we make for a loaf of bread, it wouldn't be a loaf of bread. If you took out everything we make for a jar of peanut butter, it wouldn't be a jar of peanut butter. The fact is, a lot of foods and beverages just wouldn't be the same without the ingredients we make at the Archer Daniels Midland Company. Flours, sweeteners, vegetable oils, soy proteins, as well as livestock and poultry feeds, which provide for meat, eggs, and dairy products. At ADM, we produce hundreds of popular food ingredients from America's most abundant crops, and we produce them efficiently, so that food doesn't end up taking too big a bite out of your budget. You won't find the name ADM on your grocer's shelves, but from now on, you'll know we're there. ADM, supermarket to the world.
When Housing and Urban Development Secretary Jack Kemp appeared on our broadcast last week and called on the White House to develop a strong economic growth package by the end of the year, it really stirred up official Washington. It was the subject of comment all week at the Capitol. It was generally praised by conservatives and clearly resented by some on the president's staff, who said that Kemp had been reminded he was not the president's economic advisor. His call for immediate help for the economy got good reviews from you out there. But N.J. Ryder of Florida said if there is a capital gains tax cut, it should be mandatory for businesses to prove the gains will be reinvested in their businesses before a deduction is allowed. Well, thanks for joining us. If there's a review in you about our broadcast or any other issue, drop us a line. We read them all, and we'll publish the most interesting right here on Face the Nation.
This portion of Face the Nation was sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world, and by Dean Witter. There are many ways to measure success. Dean Witter measures success one investor at a time. If you'd like to write to Face the Nation, send your letter to Bob Scheiffer, Face the Nation, 2020 M Street Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20036. This broadcast was produced by CBS News, which is solely responsible for the selection of today's guests and topics. It originated in Washington, D.C.
On. Stressed out at work? Is it affecting your sex life? We'll give you some warning signs tomorrow on CBS This Morning. It's breakfast for your head.
This is CBS.
This holiday season, send your friends on an exciting trip with romance, music, and comedy. Give them an evening of great food and entertainment at the Ingersoll. It's cheaper than tickets to Hawaii, and a trip to the Ingersoll always includes our delicious buffet and a fantastic show. Through December 1st, a gift certificate good for dinner and a show for two is just $30. These special gift certificates are good any night of the week for exciting upcoming shows like Singin' in the Rain and Aloha Hawaii. Everyone likes to have fun, so this year give a gift certificate from the Ingersoll.
Now, shopping for color TVs, microwave ovens, audio, and video will never be the same in Des Moines with the grand opening of Rex at 2900 University Avenue in Clock Tower Square, 1 block east of Valley West Mall, where you'll find a nationally sold VHS camcorder for just $4.99, or this Panasonic 40-inch big screen color TV with remote and on-screen graphics just $12.99. Now, during Rex's grand opening celebration.
It's live with Regis and Kathy Lee.
And you guys are such an amazing smash hit.
The show you don't want to miss.
Weekdays at 9 on TV8.
Never-ending spending, tonight at 10.
This is The Jim Walden Show.